Hello and welcome. We're going to be performing a bit of an experiment here today. My name is Ryan. I am an unauthorized church historian. I don't have any fancy degrees. I'm just a guy with a bunch of books. And I have been gifted for a very long time a set of books called the Joseph Smith Papers. And these are enormous volumes, are very expensive. But what's funny about it is that the Joseph Smith Papers website that they're associated with actually has a huge amount more material than the actual published books do. But to give you an example of these, here's the Histories Volume 1, for example. These have been published since about maybe 2007. And they're hugely insightful. It's basically a collection of raw data about Joseph Smith, about the Latter-day Saint movement, about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and their early history, and just all sorts of stuff. This has been a labor that's been gone on for many, many years. And one thing that I've noticed is that they're not really being used that much. People will reference them or maybe pass those words through their own mouth to you. And so what I thought I would try to do is explain what the Joseph Smith Papers are and then use them to explain church history and the Doctrine and Covenants as we have it. Every year, if you're not familiar with it, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does a different book of what we call our standard works, which is our scriptures. So one year it's the Old Testament. The next year it's the New Testament. Then it's the Book of Mormon. Then it's the Doctrine and Covenants, and repeat. And we've been doing this for years and years and years. And I won't speak to experiences before my time, but just in my own time, what we call doctrine or gospel doctrine or in Sunday school, this is how we've been doing it for a long time. And so what I have wanted to do this year, because in 2023, which was about 2 years ago, they completed all of the publications from the Joseph Smith Papers. And I've been fortunate enough to get them as birthday presents, Christmas presents, whatever, for years and years. And so I thought I would just take these two things, the Doctrine and Covenants and the Joseph Smith Papers, merge them together a little bit more for you. So we'll see if the experiment works, but that's the point of the exercise. So first off, what I wanted to do is kind of explain where these things started. And it kind of starts on a personal note, quite frankly. So I have here what are called the Papers of Joseph Smith. This is the first volume of the Papers of Joseph Smith. And inside of it, it says, "Merry Christmas, Grandma. Love, Ryan." And that's me. This was actually a gift that I gave to my grandmother a long time ago when I was in high school. And I believe this book, copyright, is actually in 1989. And so this was edited by a man named Dean Jesse, who is a church historian and scholar. And this is from a long time ago. And from my understanding, this volume actually began, the process of this began in 1983. It only made to 2 volumes. So this was the second one that I did not give to my grandmother. This is basically a journal from 1832 to 1842. So we have some journals in here. We have some individual letters and autobiographical writings in here. And that's kind of where this project ended. As you might imagine with almost anything else, I've even experienced this trying to start a podcast, is it's a lot of work, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of travel. The Papers of Joseph Smith, just like George Washington, Mahatma Gandhi, I mean, anybody you're trying to get papers for, maybe even yourself, they're scattered to the wind. They're all over the place. And so there's a lot of travel involved. There's a lot of gathering involved. Just for these papers, for example, at the time they were in the archives of the church, which has now been moved over to a new institution called the Church History Library. And then they were at BYU, and they were at the University of Utah, and they were at the Museum of Chicago, and they were in private autograph collections, and the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is now called the Community of Christ, which I have to just say, I can't say enough good about the treasure trove and the wonderful things that organization has done for early church history, and I would even argue some early American history. Anyway, all these things have to be gathered together. So the project was more or less either shelved, if you want to call it that, or reworked. And so years go down the road, and we get a volume here published in 2007. This is the journals edition, and each one of them is color-coded. I'll get to that in a moment. Each one is color-coded, and this journals book in 2007 was the first published volume of a new thing called the Joseph Smith Papers. This project went on for many years. In fact, The first book was published in 2007. The last book was published later in 2023. But basically, there was more of a church endorsement of it, and there was more money involved. The Larry H. Miller Foundation and the Gail Miller Foundation, I should say, the kind of the Miller families in Utah, put together the funding to keep this project going. And to kind of give you a sense of how intense this got, is the first volume, Journals Volume 1, is published, and it looks great. And everybody's there, and they're looking good. The second volume comes out, which is actually this huge tome, this facsimile edition. This is volume 2, or volume 1 of the Revelations and Translations, the second book. This has a dedicatory page to Larry H. Miller, who passed away of a coronary incident before he could see any of the others published. So for starters, the main founding member, or one of the main founding members, passed away. Then in 2008, we had the Great Recession. That was a threat to the project. And then we had COVID-19 in 2020 and 2019, and 2021 and 2022, which could have totally derailed the project. So this was a major effort over a long period of time, which is why I kind of want to incorporate it. I want to talk about it a little bit more directly. So that's a little bit of a history about how we got to the Joseph Smith papers. I should also mention here, there's other things. There's the personal writings of Joseph Smith, which was a project that was a little bit earlier in the 70s. Even before that, the famous one that a lot of people know about is a volume series called History of the Church. This was done by B.H. Roberts. This is kind of a more cheaper version, something that I've read in my time. This is what the section headings of the Doctrine and Covenants was actually based on. So that's a little bit about how we got to this. I also just wanted to mention something about how much of an impact this has had on not only this church, but also other organizations. So there's been a couple of things that the church was really, I would almost even say, secretive about. They really did not want these out. One was a publication of something called the Council of 50. These were 3-minute book volumes that were kept very guarded for a long time. This documented the end of the Nauvoo period as the saints were traveling west, where they were going to go. Originally, it was Texas. They were thinking of Oregon country. Then they went to Utah. So if you're wondering why the path, that kind of explains the path. There was their packing list, and then it was about their government when they were going to get there, and they were sort of leaving the U.S. At this time. Beyond Texas was either territory governed by Mexico or Britain. It was a very different United States than we have now, but this religious sect had to sort of leave the United States because of persecutions and the killing of Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram and some other things that they felt were wrongs done to them. So that was published recently, and that's a major change. Another one is when we published the manuscript book of the Book of Mormon, meaning the handwriting that they used to actually print copies of the Book of Mormon. The introduction of that included the seer stone that Joseph used to translate the Book of Mormon, which was one of the methods that he used to translate the Book of Mormon. So that, I mean, the Latter-day Saints aren't really big into relics and all of those kinds of things. Not to say they're bad, we just don't really go there. And so to actually publish photos of the seer stone was a pretty big deal. In 2017, the church actually bought that printer's manuscript, which was owned by the Community of Christ. So that was a major change. Previous to that, we were using the best thing that they had for photocopies in 1923, which were called photostatic copies. These images are sort of reversed, like photo negatives, but it's great because you can see what those documents look like, in this case, 100 years ago. So we actually acquired the actual papers and documents. They're now housed in Salt Lake City at this really nice church history library. Again, if you want to go visit, please do. 2024 was a big year. And just as of this recording, that was last year, not even a year ago that this happened. But that the church purchased the Kirtland Temple from the Community of Christ. Along with that came Revelation Book 1, which is where were originally written down before they were printed. So some major changes. In 2013, the church changed how they cited their own Doctrine and Covenants. It used to be that they were using, again, this volume, History of the Church, as the method of, where did this section come from, who was involved, what day was it done, all that kind of stuff. Those references to the history of church were taken away because now they were referencing original documentation, and all of that is housed and published in the Joseph Smith papers. So one last thing before we go, I wanted to compare what the project started out as. I would, this is not official, but I would say like 2007. This is what it was going to look like. So as you can see, you got, they're all color coded. The biggest thing of note here is you've got 10 of the blue ones. Those are the documents. That's chronological order. You have 3 of the journals. Those are the sort of reddish ones to the left. To the left is the histories, 2 of those. And to the left of that is you have these 4 Revelations and Translations books. Something to consider about this, by the way, is as you count these books up, just to remember that the very tall manuscript Revelation book, the very first one there, and the first short guide there, volume 1, those are the same thing. So what they did is they did a facsimile edition of the Revelations books, and then they just did a transcription-only version of it. So they're really the same thing. So, for example, in my personal collection, I only have one. I didn't feel like I needed to have another copy of the exact same thing. At the end of it, though, you got those 2 gray guys. You got volume 1 and volume 2, and those are legal records. Now, my apologies to any of the attorneys out there, but I guess that was just not interesting enough. So this is what wound up being what they published. So for starters, and this is kind of what's fun about this, and this is why I get excited about this series. As you can see, the original one was 10 documents volumes. That expanded to 15 documents volumes. So the sheer number of these books expanded to where the actual collection is 28 volumes long. I have 27 because, again, I didn't need to have a facsimile edition and a transcribed version of the Revelations and Translations. So from this, you can see that most of it kind of stayed the same. The coloring stayed the same. There's still 2 histories books, 3 journals. Those are just all of Joseph Smith's journals. The histories, you have the actual histories, and then ones that were assigned, one that was sort of carried away by somebody who fell away from the church. We'll get into that, I'm sure, in a future podcast. 15 of the documents, so that was long. The Revelations expanded as well. So you have something about the Book of Abraham got its own thing. We actually published the original holographs or handwritten account of the Book of Mormon. So we get the actual, Oliver Cowdery sitting down with Joseph Smith, like that original manuscript of the Book of Mormon. And then you get the printer's manuscript of the Book of Mormon, like I said before, we acquired that recently. So it expanded out. So there's more Revelations and Translations books. There's more documents books. And then at the end, again, my apologies, I guess legal records weren't exciting enough. What they really did is fold them into the document series. And then they added one at the end. That brown version there, only one, is called Administrative Records, and that is the Council of 50 Minutes. Again, 3 volumes of minute books that they put in. It was a major shift from, the leadership of Joseph Smith all the way through to the saints arriving in the Salt Lake Valley. So just wanted to kind of compare this whole project was so dynamic, and so much stuff came out as they were researching and reaching out to people to try to find stuff, that it really expanded out. So again, here's the before, what they originally thought it was going to be, and here's after. And so it's kind of fun to see. And like I said, the printing project is done. And even with all these books, once again, I would say if you're really interested in seeing it for yourself, go to the website. It has everything on there. So that's all I have for today. I could probably yap and yap and yap about this for days at a time. But thank you very much. And yeah, excited to actually dive into some of the sections of the Doctrine and Covenants and some of the history surrounding some very important documents in the Latter-day Saint faith. Thank you.